Good morning, everybody. Anybody here from UCF? Hey. All right. I don't think I'm going to use that hand mic. I'll drive the AV guys crazy probably. So this is working, right? I want to get something straight right from the beginning. Besides the fact that the intro was too long, the fact of the matter is that somebody told me that there's a college football game going to be played, in Atlanta tonight? Is that what it is? Yeah. Well, okay, I'm a fan. But why in the hell would you play for a second place trophy and a bucket full of Dr. Pepper? The national champs were crowned yesterday because they won a week ago. So congratulations to UCF and the Knights. Yeah. That's awesome. Now I did a little bit of groundwork ahead of time because Laura's from Georgia and my friend Scott too is an Alabama boy. So I did my homework first. I was careful. So I should survive the rest of the day. But for the rest of you folks that are interested in important college football games, I'd say wait till next year. When we started talking about our plans for coming back to Orlando and doing a second Sustainability Symposium, we were thinking about the themes and thinking about the messaging and so forth. And keep in mind that at this time a year ago, there was a pretty big upheaval and a transition that was going on at the highest levels of government in this country, and there was a lot of uncertainty, to say the least, and a lot of concern, and we all sort of were hoping for the best. And so when we started to discuss our theme for this year, I talked with our team, and I suggested that we go with something that had to do with seeking the light, to seek the light. Now, and I'm all for champions of change. You can see that I got outvoted. They said it was a little bit too woo-woo. Now, folks, I've had to answer to a lot of things in my time, but woo-woo is not one of them, okay? At the same time, I think that the two things go hand in hand. And I was harking back to an experience from several years ago. What happens is if you hang around long enough in any particular field, you become what is known as a luminary. And so you get invited to participate in all these things. And usually what it means is that you're volunteering your time in some of the most boring exercises in the history of the world. And so that includes things like code development. Code development is this is one of the driest exercises possible. But it's really important, and it's an honor to be able to do that, to help to create and direct public policy, or at least the opportunity for it. And so about a decade ago, I happened to be serving on a committee for the International Code Council, and in fact, it was to develop the International Green Construction Code, and I was the only builder at the table. In fact, I may have been the only builder in the room. And one of the people on the committee I had a lot of history with was a gentleman from Austin, Texas. His name is Richard Morgan. And Richard was really the steadying influence and the constant progressive in the Austin Energy Program and helped to take Austin to the forefront of sustainable development and green building where it is to this day. And we would have dinner at the end of the day. It was a several-day process to work on this code. And at the end of one of those days, we were having a late dinner, and we were comparing notes on the fact that it seems like we spent half of our time trying to parry the forces who were there to promote special interest. and they were there to protect a particular market, or they had an agenda that really wasn't big picture. And he talked about the fact that, you know, you had to find your way in spite of that. So a few weeks later, after I had returned home, I got a little package in the mail, and it was a rare and pretty well thumbed, used volume of poems by Wendell Berry. And one of those poems is titled "To Know the Dark." And I'll just give you the first two lines of that poem. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. I would submit to you that we've been in the dark for the past year. We've learned what is in the dark. We have seen the absolute vindictive, deliberate dismantling of environmental protections. We have seen the destruction of civility. We have seen things in the darkness that we hoped to never see again. But I think it's a good lesson for us. We need to know how to navigate in the dark, because this won't be the last time that it ever happens. We will find our way back to the light, and it will be so much brighter and sweeter as a result. I've had the privilege over the years of presenting information and training and just philosophy to audiences actually in 49 of the 50 states and on 4 continents of the earth. And what I have found is that people want the same thing. They are seeking the light. They're looking for an opportunity for an enriched life and for better futures for their children and grandchildren, and for all species. Of all of those opportunities, one stands out in my mind, and I always remember, and I hope that I never forget. I was invited to present at a Sustainability Awards program in Tulsa, Oklahoma, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And one of the real treats that came with my acceptance of that opportunity was I got to spend the day at a local high school. And the high school, how should we say, it's what is known as the wrong side of the tracks. It wasn't the most economically vibrant part of Tulsa. There were many, many single-parent households, lots of issues. The students had a difficult time with a number of things. And so, you know, here's this old guy that comes in and wants to talk about sustainability in the future. And it took a while to warm him up. But after they began to trust me, we had a great dialogue. And at one point, I felt comfortable enough to ask the question. I said, how many of you have had the conversation at the dinner table that involved the decision whether you're going to be able to buy all the groceries you needed for the rest of the month or keep the electricity on? And I'll tell you that about 90% of the hands in the room went up. And maybe the other 10% were reluctant, or maybe a little embarrassed, or maybe just not sure. In the richest, most blessed country in the world, there should never be a question at the dinner table about whether you're going to have to choose between enough food to feed the family or keep the lights on. And so it's really important for us to think about it in terms of the long game. We're really good at the short game. You know, we know how We know how to make money hand over fist, and we know how to create all sorts of things for people, whether they need them or not. But the problem is that we don't play the long game. In another example, actually was invited to speak at a conference in Beijing. I think it was about 2008. And so I was trying to give a big picture talk. And went in and presented the forecast for the next 5 years for development and building in America. And it went over pretty well, and it was, very politely received. But the next speaker happened to be the housing minister for Japan, and he gave the 300-year housing plan for Japan. So I had to sort of step back and think about what that meant, and to consider the importance of going long, playing the long game, and investing in generations and not just in success. You will probably remember a number of years ago the tragic explosion and resulting disaster at a coal mine in West Virginia where a number of lives were lost. And the thing that I remember most about the coverage was sort of in the wrap-up as they were recovering bodies and that sort of thing. And there was a miner who was cornered by a camera crew, and I'm not sure he was in the mood to really talk about it, but he indulged the questions. And, he was probably a young man. He was probably in his 30s, but he looked like he was twice that. He looked like he was in his 60s or 70s because he had a very hard life. And he was weathered, and he was dark with the coal dust, and he was worried about how he was going to make a living and what was going to happen to his livelihood. And so the reporter asked him if he was going to go back in the hole after it was allowed. And his terminology was a little off, so please forgive that, overlook it. But his response in resignation and in sadness, and yet with determination, was, what am I going to do? Put up a windmill in somebody's yard? And that broke my heart. Because here was this young man who only had one path to providing for his family and his future. He didn't know any other way. And I thought, what if you did? What if you did put up a windmill in somebody's yard? What if you worked in the light? What if you worked with the sun on your face and the wind in your hair? What would that be like? Let's don't play the short game. Let's not go back in the hole. There's nothing there but death. We're harvesting death and exposing it to the living world. Let's find other ways and make sure that we're always seeking that light. We have people today that not only carry the light, but they shine the light every place that they go. We're going to hear from some wonderful minds and some big hearts. And I hope that at the end of the day, we will all be a little more illuminated than we started off. Thank you so much for being here, and go Knights.